That's not my job, I'm sorry. Before I begin my speech, I want to ask you to do something. At any point during my talk, close your eyes and ask yourself, who is speaking? What can I find out about her from her voice? Can I hear two worlds in her one voice? In my family, I am known as the singer. I sang a mean My Heart Will Go On when the Titanic came out, and I was hooked. I sang it at all our family parties, on the karaoke, of course, on the magic mic, and there I was, a 6-year-old child singing Celine Dion's My Heart Will Go On, and acing that key change, by the way. I remember being paid extra Christmas money for singing karaoke at our holiday parties, and my parents will attest to the fact that I always sang. And I was a pretty good singer as a kid, but they will probably say that they were surprised when I decided to pursue classical voice performance in college. Before I delve into the near past, let me take you through my distant past. I was born in Manila, Philippines, and my entrance in the world definitely unsettled my parents' plain mid-20s life. To call me an oopsie baby is kind of an understatement. My mother is a computer programmer, and on the brink of the Y2K, she received a job offer in America. Today we call this phenomenon the brain drain. But back then, my mom considered it a step up in her career and bettering our circumstances. The rest of the family, my dad, my younger brother, and myself, did not join her until nearly a year later. We moved to the States in November 1997 when I was 4 years old. And honestly, I do not remember the culture shock. I remember everything as a really fun adventure. And after talking to Bethany, our FSA VP, I realized I had a really lucky childhood, especially for someone fresh off the boat. My mother was one of numerous immigrants that the technology sector pulled to America, so we came into a strong, vibrant community of other Filipino immigrants. We became each other's American family, each other's ninangs and ninongs, titos and titas and inaak. We had family parties every weekend, and obviously there's karaoke. And the Chicago suburbs were flourishing with other Asian American immigrants. And my schools were fairly saturated with kids of my own situation. Kids who were born in a different country and came to America. We all took it in stride like it was no big deal. And I assimilated quickly. In the assimilation process, I took up the American dream, and I fully adopted an American voice. I remember teasing my parents for their Filipino accents, as if my brother and my Americanized voice, were the cultural dominant in our household. My parents enforced the high GPA policy in my house, of course, and I worked hard to not only meet, but exceed their expectations. You see, I realized from an early age that I wanted to live a life as a classical musician. I had been taking piano lessons from my early childhood, and I started taking singing lessons in high school. Classical music had a magnetism that I could not explain, and my parents had a strictly Filipino dream for me, to better myself and my situation, to better the collective life of my family. In stereotypical fashion, they pushed me to be a doctor or an engineer. And for a long time, I did want to be a doctor. And then I wanted to be a psychologist, which is like a doctor of the brain. And then I wanted to be an opera singer. And the disparate connection between doctor and opera singer was a shock, to say the least. So I had to prove to them over and over again that this was the right choice, that I was going to be able to have this career and feed myself and pay my own rent. I competed heavily, and I put a lot of pressure on myself to excel, to win other people's approval. I practiced my singing and refined my technique, all in the vain attempt to win more competitions, to win over more approval. I threw all my energy into classical singing. I stopped singing Celine Dion. And to distract myself from the woes of the performing world, and trust me, there are a lot of woes, I threw myself into my schoolwork. In retrospect, I lost sense of my own voice. I sang in the refined way of the Western classical music tradition, I stopped writing poetry in my attempt to study the poetry of others, but I wanted a career in music. I chose this. I wanted to study music for the rest of my life. Through a roundabout way, I stumbled onto the study of historical musicology, which is basically the academic study of music as a subject in the field of the humanities. That journey is in itself fraught with issues of finding my own voice, but it all boils down to getting me here, to the Jacobs School of Music at Indiana University. Last semester, my first semester of graduate studies, I did what I set out to do. I did well in my studies, I got comfortable speaking up for myself in class with bolder and better insights, and I felt comfortable in my voice again. I still sing, but I stopped singing for competition. I sing in choir, and I am one voice in the sea of many. And sometimes I miss singing solo music, but I do not miss the pressure for approval. This semester, I stumbled upon major musical figures in the avant-garde musical scene. Among them is Meredith Monk, a vocal performer, composer, dancer, theater artist, who has claimed that the voice is as fluid as the spine. She wanted to explore all the possibilities of meaning in her own voice. She writes, quote, "That inner voice has both gentleness and clarity. So to get to authenticity, you really keep going down to the bone, to the honesty and the inevitability of something." End quote. In doing research for the Southeast Asian and ASEAN Studies program, I also came across Grace Nono, a Filipino working at Harvard Divinity School who has taken upon herself to record the music of the indigenous shaman in the Philippines. She has immersed herself in the oral tradition of these women who use their voice as healing technologies. And I could not help but to think, here is my voice in the studies of other women singers, a voice that is fraught with personal history and rich in the collective history of its gender and its ethnicity, a history of its ancestors. Sometimes I ask myself if my plight is in vain. Is learning about Filipino music making through an academic lens self-serving? Is learning about the voice and all the signifiers in the voice a type of self-therapy, an academic study that I can use to answer questions about my own self-identity? When I asked a professor in the musicology department these questions, she answered, "What is wrong with that? Some of the best scholarship is done by people who have something at stake in their writing. People who ask questions of the musical world because they are asking the same questions of themselves." I titled this speech, "Two Worlds, One Voice," to tie into the theme of tonight's Filipino Culture Night. I'm afraid I mostly gave you one voice and kind of two worlds. My own voice and its journey back to its bilateral identity. I cannot tell you how my one voice embodies two worlds, or even two traditions of music making, the Western classical tradition and the Filipino tradition. I cannot tell you because I do not know yet. But I do know that I have these questions, and I'm building up the tools to answer them. And maybe that's what I want you to take away from my personal narrative. It's never too late to ask these questions. It's never too late to take up an identity that seemed dormant. And it's never too late to realize your voice is infinite in its meaning. In my family, I was known for singing Celine Dion in a karaoke machine. And I'll admit, I'll probably still do that. But now I will be singing with my own voice, an embodiment of two infinite worlds. Thank you.